Environmental Council. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Kristy, it's good to be here.
So, Tim, let's talk. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they're doing a study and they're looking at several points of possible entry of Asian carp into the Great Lakes system. The Great Lakes Commission did a study focusing on the separation of the waterways and is it actually possible? And your study found?
We find that it's feasible. With the cities initiative, the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, the states, who I work for, wanted to know, is it possible? How could it be done? And how could we do it in such a way that would protect those existing uses? You know, the transportation, the commercial transportation, the use of the waterway for water quality, for treating discharges of pollution, and for flood protection. And we found that it could be done.
But you think that this is the prime way to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes system?
It's the best way to keep Asian carp out, but more in addition to that, Kristy, we have to think about other species as well. We have to think about other species that could be coming up the Mississippi. We know that there's a fish called the snakehead in the Mississippi, and we also need to be concerned about species from the Great Lakes moving down to the Mississippi.
Ballpark figure of what a project like this would cost and how much time it would take to actually do the separation?
We did an estimate of the costs, and we found that it would cost up in the neighborhood of about $4.5 billion for the least expensive alternative. Could be more than that, but you know, that's the one that makes the most sense.
Looking at a range of how high could it go?
It could go up to $9 billion.
A lot of focus, Kristy, has been placed on Chicago and the separation there. But just a couple of weeks ago, we got news of environmental DNA found of silver carp, which is the ones that jump from the water that people have seen all that video about. Were you surprised when you heard about that?
I was shocked, worried, you know, what I think after taking some time in letting it sink in, my first question is it juveniles? Do we have juveniles, or do we have adults? If we have juveniles that are in the system, then I'll be really worried. Now, I think I told you last time I was on that some of the more conventional ways that they've been trying to find these fish haven't really been working, and so I really am hoping that ODNR, the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, is maybe learning from those you know, problems that have occurred and adapting and using different ways potentially. But at the same time, I do think that a lot of focus should be on the Chicago area, and that we really do separate those two basins because we can't wait any longer. If you know, we don't know what's going on in Lake Erie right now. We need to move at the same pace. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources is looking at that, and I think we really need to keep pushing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to utilize the Great Lakes Commission study and to separate those two basins.
Well, you know, we had an Asian carp panel here at Great Lakes today that I actually moderated, and we had someone from the Army Corps of Engineers on there, and it seems to be the big complaint here is time. But they've said, look, we have parameters of our study that we need to make sure that we cover all of our bases, and we're not going to be able to report to Congress until January of 2014.
Yep.
Is that too late, Tim?
No, I don't think so. If they can get the job done by 2014, let's face it, it's a very complex system, and there are a lot of uses and users that depend on it. And you know, a metropolitan region of 9.5 million people have grown up around, and the city of Chicago is a great city, and you know, they depend on the uses of that waterway. So reversing it and replumbing Chicago is not going to happen overnight, unfortunately. So if we can get the study done in 2014 and we can start construction and start moving quickly after that, we should be okay. We hope we will.
Kristy, have you found that the public has become very educated very quickly on the issue of Asian carp and other invasive species, but mostly Asian carp in the Great Lakes?
I think so. It was funny and very telling when a friend of mine from college, I called her to see how she was doing, and one of the first things she said to me was, "Wow, what about those Asian carp?" And I said, "Wow, you've really, you know, you've been reading up a lot about it." My next door neighbor, I live outside of the Great Lakes Basin in Columbus, Ohio, and he said, "Oh, have you heard about those Asian carp that are moving up?" So I think a lot of people and a lot of traditional people that we wouldn't traditionally think about have been really becoming educated about this issue.
Yeah.
Tim, what's in place right now that is stopping the Asian carp from advancing into Lake Michigan?
Well, it's curious. The Carp have not advanced for the last 5 years or so, and they don't quite understand exactly why.
So could you say that we're doing okay, or?
Well, I'd like to say that it's because of the electric barrier. The fact is there is an electric fence, a barrier, that is providing a degree of protection. But the fish aren't actually up against the barrier yet. There is commercial netting and fishing that's going on. But it could also be a lack of adequate habitat for reproduction. They really don't know. But we know this. They're too close for comfort. They're too close to take a risk and take a chance with the Great Lakes, with a fishery and a resource as valuable as we have.
Kristy, I'm going to give the last word to you. We know that this eventually, the question of separation, if that is indeed an option of the U.S. Army Corps, will put on the table for Congress. They're the ones that are going to have to make a decision. So there is going to be, I would assume, a public education and at least a lot of talk about this to make sure that people understand what we're up against.
I think, there's a really good network already now, and I think it will continue to grow until this really becomes that the Corps comes out with their study. And yes, it's going to take a huge undertaking of educating the public, but the public really wants that information. It's something that is in the headlines. It's something that's selling. People are constantly looking for that type of information. So I think what they really want to know is, how can I help? And when is this going to be solved? And certainly, having those conversations that it's a complex issue, is very difficult.
All right, Kristy Meyer, Tim Eber, thanks so much for joining us on Great Lakes Now. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kristy.
Thank you.